A conservative legal group is now suing the Trump administration for the imposition of these tariffs, these blanket tariffs, but specifically here as it relates to Trump's tariff on China without getting congressional approval of it. This organization, a conservative group called New Civil Liberties Alliance, announced their lawsuit this week. We just filed this first lawsuit challenging Trump's China tariff. The IEEPA is a law that lets presidents freeze assets, not tax American businesses. No one's ever used it this way in 50 years. Our client is a small business in Florida that is hurt by this unlawful move. The head of this organization, John Vecchione, says, look, this organization's about 7 years old. A lot of our cases, he says, are against the Trump administration when they defy conservative principles, which I think is basically every single day. Let me just give you a little flavor of who the plaintiff is in this lawsuit. Her name is Emily Lay, small business owner from Florida, and her business depends on getting products from China, and Donald Trump's tariffs are going to destroy her business. They're frankly destroying everyone's business and destroying the markets, but you need to have standing to bring a lawsuit like this. And so let me just show you what she had to say in a recent interview she just gave.
Our business, I founded it in 2008. We make beautiful planners and paper goods for busy women. They're carried in major retail stores and also on our website. And we've been paying tariffs since 2017. I employ 8 additional women who are all Americans. We've paid nearly $1.2 million since 2017, and we are looking at anywhere between 54% and 79% tariffs as of lately.
Well, now we also know that China is retaliating against the United States, which is not a shocker. You know, Harry Littman from the Talking Feds YouTube channel, Talking Feds podcast, and Talking Feds Substack. Harry, you know, Kellyanne Conway used very interesting language this past week on Fox, where she said what tariffs should really be called are, you know, in her alternative facts world, she says we should really call them old sanctions. Don't call them tariffs, call them old sanctions. And when she said that, I know she's someone who does alternate facts and lies all the time, but it was an interesting word. I was thinking about it, but it all made sense now. Let me play you this clip and then let me show you what they said in the lawsuit, because what Trump is doing with these tariffs that he doesn't have the power unilaterally to impose is he's basically saying they're tariffs publicly, but legally justifying them as sanctions, claiming emergency powers to do it, doing an end run around Congress, and then trying to get the House of Representatives to basically bless it and go along with it with the MAGAs. Watch what Kellyanne Conway says. Let's play it.
So this will do that. And look, for everybody saying tariffs are a tax, I think you have to look at them more as the old sanctions. The president is trying to compel or incentivize transformative generational changes in behavior by companies, by categories, by countries, by collections of countries. EU, I'm looking at you.
You know, EU, they attack Europe like the heart.
Right.
Taliban, Afghanistan, the cockamamie formula they used to get exemptions or to get tariffs did not apply to the Taliban. Taliban apparently got an exemption. Europe gets hit the hardest. And when you look at this lawsuit, Harry, what it talks about is that Trump is purporting to order these tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, the IEEPA. But that is a statute that authorizes presidents to order sanctions as a rapid response to international emergencies. It does not allow a president to impose tariffs on the American people. Trump's executive order, for example, the one imposing a China tariff, are therefore unconstitutional, it argues. Then it goes and says it violates a few other things. But, you know, interesting conservative group bringing this lawsuit representing Florida's small business owner. I think we're going to see a lot more lawsuits like this. But as we see the markets crashing, we see all these lawsuits against former President Biden when he was doing good with the economy and trying to bring rights to people. And now there's got to be a mechanism to stop Trump. What do you make of this, Harry?
Yeah, so first, it really is interesting because so much of what he's doing, and there's now actually dissension in the ranks among conservatives. It's just hurting everybody. But look, what this really is exhibit number 525 of Trump's trenching on congressional prerogatives, and exhibit 350 of his doing so by screaming and claiming emergency powers. It's the exact same move as in the Alien Enemies Act, where he, wants to use powers only granted as against enemy nations during war. This is really 90% of his efforts to grossly expand power, because he wants to say, and he does say again and again, if that's what I'm doing, you courts cannot second guess it. And he's taken it on the chin in different ways, including today on that very sort of submission. But the law out there is, basically a tax is as a tax does. And, it's a functional analysis, and it sure feels to me, I'm not a tax lawyer or accountant, but it sure feels and smells and walks and talks like a tax. And that's just everything, because the, job number one, the most unmistakable job that is for Congress and, Congress alone, not for the president, is the taxing power. So, although we haven't heard a peep, of course, from the very quiescent Congress on this, this is really what it looks to be. And so what is going to be served up to the court here is just, what are the incidents, as the lawyers would have it? What really is the essence of a tax? And, man, oh man, Conway was, it's been so long since I've seen her, was, doing this rhetorical dance that made no sense at all. And it's for that very reason. So when this goes to court, it'll be, guys, is this a tax? And, and that could, in fact, kind of go up the line. But it's just complete. They have a single strategy, really, take congressional powers, claim national security so nobody can second guess us, and do it again, lather, rinse, repeat for any kind of thing you want to do.
That's the important point, because we could take this example as a exemplar of what the Trump administration or regime is doing across the board when it comes to their immigration policy, literally kidnapping people, sending them to concentration camps. You and I are going to do a video about a Maryland court order demanding that, ordering the Trump administration to return somebody who was specifically instructed not to be sent to El Salvador because of prior history, or just other people who are being sent to these concentration camps.
Right.
Across the board, what the Trump regime did is they saw the Supreme Court ruling on absolute immunity about everything is national security, and is what the executive branch does. They're morphing that, I think, with kind of the unitary executive stuff that was pioneered. It's a version of what Bush legal people were saying on steroids.
That's right.
And now they're basically saying everything's a war. We're in wars, and as a war,
everything's an emergency.
Emergency the border, just because this is our power. Wars, stay out, and then you get into these areas. Harry,
just one more quick thing about that is, what's the to me the paradigm of it? The law firms. So we know precisely, everyone knows precisely why he picked out these first law firms. They were involved somehow on the other side in very legitimate ways, of course, or people, not even people were there and had left. Andrew Weissman was hired by Jenner Block for a few months. Mark Elias and Bob Bauer were at Perkins Coie, but are long since gone. And those are presented in a laughable way as posing national security risk. Can you imagine the argument that you'd have to try to give at deposition if it ever comes to that? Well, why precisely do you think Perkins Coie is a threat to the national security, but their roll of the dice here, and I think you're right to mention the Supreme Court, because that's where they're really looking, is that it'll get up high enough and the court will say something like the 5-4. The president says national security, everything else stops, and they do what they say. That, I think, is the penultimate strategy. The ultimate strategy being to ignore what courts say. But that's the game, and you can apply it to any field, any ball, anything at all, including right here, as you say, to this tariffs, which are really taxes.
Yeah, and I think Trump took his attack like he did with the media companies and try to freeze corporate news and make them both sides. Now,
Right.
Also, when he attacks the law firms, he goes after ones that he's intimidated by, that he thinks are going to hold him accountable. But then he goes to build his army of all these other corporate firms to make them bend the knee, provide free legal services to the Trump agenda as part of these settlements, knowing they have transactional practices. And you're seeing these big firms just be completely deplorable and bend the knee to him. So there's this effort to invoke to one, control the House of Representatives and the Senate and totally make them, just do whatever he wants. Then in terms of who's going to challenge, some of the best lawyers work at big firms. You kind of shut them down as well. You try to bring some of these other firms that are even fighting you. You embroil them in litigation, and then you take your war powers. And this is their plan, and then try to roll like
a very quick postscript here is because the legal industry has been pretty disappointing and weenie-ish. That Don Verrilli, the former Solicitor General, filed the brief today in support of Perkins Coie, and he's been going around for weeks to all the firms saying, sign on. What we need is a show of collective force. And all the big guns, like the top 10 firms, just all thought about it, went back and forth, and basically didn't sign on. However, more than 500 law firms signed the Verrilli brief, which was submitted today. They're more medium range, not the behemoths, but still 500 law firms. That's a pretty good show of force.
We should try to get Verrilli on. If we have a point of contact, let's see if we get him on. That'd be let's see. Let's do it. Harry, thank you. That's why you got to listen to Talking Feds, Talking Feds YouTube, Talking Feds Substack, and Talking Feds podcast. Let's do it. Hit subscribe here as well. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.